Hi, I'm Katie Noble, and this is a presentation I put together to answer some questions about the open space bonds in Midway and Wasatch County. Why do we need to preserve Midway? Midway and the Heber Valley are at risk for being loved to death. You've probably seen all of the development that's happening around town. We all need places to live, but it's also important to plan our growth. Midway is one of the few Alpine Valley towns left in Utah that still has a beautiful rural feel and tradition. It was built on hard work, strong families, and community. Today, it is threatened by a stampede of developers anxious to turn Midway and the Heber Valley into a completely different place. There's nothing wrong with development, but many of the developers don't come from the Heber Valley, and they don't really care about it. There are 1,443 residences approved to be built along Route 40 by the Jordanelle, and 350 new homes approved to be built around Midway. That's 350 homes that have reached final approval. There are 1,115 homes that are somewhere in the approval process in Midway, and only 350 of those have been reached final approval. This doesn't include all of the new approved subdivisions in Heber. Why do we need open space? Open space controls traffic, it contributes to good air quality, it controls property tax increases, it gives residents a sense of calmness and well-being, it provides outdoor opportunities, it promotes food security, and it teaches the next generation about farming and gardening. Why should we use bond money? We can legislate to protect open space, but legislation changes. The bond is one of our last chances to preserve the rural character of the valley floor, which is what makes Midway so special. The bond dollar gets stretched beyond $5 million through matching grants and donations, so it's more powerful than just individuals buying land. Cities use bond funds to purchase conservation easements, which legally require that the land stay undeveloped. Bond funds are more effective than legislation because conservation easements offer permanent protection. Can't we preserve the land without a bond? Land use codes can be effective tools to preserve open space. For example, in Midway, the Rural Preservation Subdivision is a good tool for preservation. Land use codes change, so they don't always offer permanent protection. In 2005, Midway was zoned as 1 house per 1 acre, and that zoning was changed to 2 to 4 houses per acre in many of the zones. The Northfields is designated as 1 house per 20 acres. In 2016, the county tried to upzone the Northfields to 1 house per 10 acres. After much public input, the measure was put on the ballot and voted down. What will $5 million buy in Midway? Once the city passes an open space bond, it signals to the conservation community that the city is serious about preservation. Public and private matching grants become available, as do public and private foundation dollars, which can double or even triple bond dollars. Over time, what started as $5 million in bond money can become $10 or even $15 million in grants and donations. Bond funds will be used to buy development rights instead of buying land outright, so that method of purchasing stretches the bond dollar further. When we talk about conservation easements, we're really talking about buying development rights. What can we buy in Midway? What's left? Experts discourage identifying specific land before introducing a bond. Identifying a parcel or parcels makes the price go up, and sometimes the identified parcel is no longer available for purchase, or the terms have changed by the time the bond passes. That means the bond effort was wasted because those funds can't be used. The Open Space Committee is defining the criteria for spaces that will take top priority for bond funding. The city is required to hold a public hearing prior to using bond money for any purchase. Can landowners be forced to sell? Landowners who want to preserve their land will come to Midway City to discuss preserving their land. This is a fully voluntary program. In most instances, landowners will keep their land but sell the development rights. If they don't want to manage the land themselves, they can lease it out to others for grazing or growing crops. Why should I pay higher taxes to preserve someone else's land? Bonding for open space is a long-term investment in the community. Open space costs tax dollars up front, but saves tax dollars in the long run. Subdivisions create a need for more roads, more road maintenance, more schools, hospitals, larger police force, larger fire department. Over time, these infrastructure and service needs cause taxes to go up. repeatedly. Preserving rural spaces, even if they don't belong to us, enhances the quality of life for us and our children. Show me the long-term tax savings. This is a question we've gotten repeatedly. There are many studies out there, and we need better information. This is the information that we have to share today. On average, farmland requires only about 37 cents in public services for every property tax dollar. Residential land in Midway costs the city $1.35 in services for every property tax dollar. That means residential land, once it's developed, is a net loss. Studies have found that for every $1 spent on open space, $4 in tourist revenue is generated. So why now? With the pace of development and loss of open land we're experiencing, now is the time to reinvest, recommit, and take responsibility for caring for the future of Midway and the Heber Valley. Land prices are increasing. 10 years ago, you could buy 12 acres in Midway for $200,000. That same land today is over $2 million. There is such a thing as too late. The City, County, and Open Space Committee have done all the research and legwork needed to ensure bond success. Residents have expressed a desire to preserve Midway's rural character in many, many city surveys. How much will the bond cost? If you live in Midway City and you're a primary resident, the bond will cost $27.16 per year per $100,000 of assessed property value. So if you look at your tax bill and you see that your home is assessed at $500,000, you'll be paying $135.80 a year for the Midway bond. If you own commercial property, that number will go up, and if you're a second homeowner, that number will go up. These numbers reflect the primary residence exemption. So what about the Wasatch County bond? The Wasatch County bond will be used to preserve land in the county. If the Wasatch County bond doesn't pass, Midway gets nothing. If the Wasatch County bond does pass, Midway can either preserve more space or use less of its own bond funds to preserve open space. So how much is the Wasatch County bond? The Wasatch County bond for a primary resident is $6.66 per $100,000 of assessed property value. So if you own a home that's assessed at $500,000 in Wasatch County, you'll be paying $33.28 a year. If you live in Midway and the Midway bond passes, you will pay the $135.80 a year for the Midway bond, and if the Wasatch County bond passes, you'll be paying $33.28 for the Wasatch County bond as well. If one bond doesn't pass, you don't pay anything for that bond. If you don't own property, you don't pay anything for that bond either. This is just for people who own property. Why support both bonds? The county bond is very inexpensive, and the cost per resident of both bonds will go down as the population increases. As you saw from the earlier slides, there are many homes slated to come into the Heber Valley. The cost of the bond will be shared between all of those homeowners. Furthermore, no one pays a dime until the bond funds are spent. It's a little bit like having a credit card, where you don't pay for anything until you've spent the money. Much of the county bond will be used to preserve the Heber Valley, which is critical to our quality of life. If the county bond doesn't pass, the Midway bond will still be in place to preserve Midway. If the Midway bond doesn't pass, Midway will only receive a small portion of the county bond dollars. Either way we pay. We can pay now for a long-term investment in our quality of life and preserve Midway's rural spaces and heritage, or we can pay later, down the road, for developments, increased taxes, increased congestion, lower air quality, blocked view corridors, and more homes. Which legacy would you like to leave for the next generation? Vote for the bonds. Vote for future generations. Vote for preserving our valley's rural heritage. Vote for your quality of life. Vote for the bonds. Your grandkids will thank you. Thanks so much for taking the time to educate yourself about the open space bonds.